Hey guys, welcome to my review of Mission Impossible Season 1, Episode 25, entitled Shock. Alright guys, so in this episode, the IMF get entrusted with saving a US ambassador who gets kidnapped by a agent from a not friendly country to the US. Basically, the IMF have to go into this country to go and find the US ambassador and in turn discover what this agency has planned for this neutral country that wants to make a peace accord with the United States. But to do that, they have to stop an assassination first. So the one thing that I loved about this episode is they took the guest star of this week, and when they showed Dan Briggs getting made up as the guest star of the week, I really like that because it's just a simple scene of Dan sitting in a chair getting a mask put on his face by Roland piece by piece. And I absolutely love that the mask that Roland is putting on Dan's face is basically in pieces. So I guess that before the scene happened, Roland made the mask somehow and then pre-cut it. And basically what he's doing is he's putting the mask on Dan's face, but he's gluing it. And I really, really love that effect. When the IMF goes to supposedly find out where Wilson is and kidnap the guy that is supposed to kill Wilson and another high-ranking official of this government, I love the whole ruse that they do where Cinnamon goes in as the cousin of Wilson, and she makes her way into the big house that they're in, and she basically impersonates the cousin of this individual. But while the assassin who is impersonating Wilson speaks to Cinnamon, Willie comes behind him, knocks him out, and puts him in a trunk, replacing him with Dan. And I love this moment because Gort, the assassin's real name, smokes cigarettes, but he does it with a cigarette holder. And when Willie knocks him out, the cigarette holder falls on the ground. So when Dan assumes the role as Gort, portraying Wilson, his secretary, the main guy behind this whole plot, the primary agent from an unspecified country, just looks at Gort because it's the first time that he's seen Gort smoking a cigarette without a cigarette holder. And I really like that moment. But here's the thing about that moment. There are several scenes in this episode with this head agent from an unfriendly country looking at Dan as Gort with this like really, 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 shady look on his face, like, who the hell are you? Or you're acting really weird. What's going on here? But here's the thing. That guy never acts on finding out if this guy is the assassin that he hired. But it would have been really nice to see this guy, who is supposedly the leader of the foreign country who set up this whole assassination plot, if this guy would have tested Dan as Gort to make sure that it was really Gort. He didn't do that at all in this episode. All he did was give him funny looks. I really wish the writers would have done something there to possibly make it a little bit more dangerous for Dan impersonating this assassin. That would have been a way to bring up the tension a little bit more. The prime attraction of this episode, I think, is a direction. specifically when the IMF gets the assassin Gort, and they make him believe that he's in a mental hospital to discover the plot. They end up actually prying the information out of him by giving him electric shock therapy and making him believe that his actual life was a fabrication and who he really is a banker. The direction in this episode is so well done, because in order to show the character of Gort losing his mind, the IMF basically make this padded cell, because he's supposed to be in a mental institution, and they put speakers on the outside of the padded cell. So when Gort is in the padded cell, the IMF connects sounds of people screaming and writhing in pain. Throughout that sequence, they actually put some voices asking, "Where is Wilson? Where is Wilson?" So I thought that was really cool. But I really liked the way that their director showed Gort going completely crazy and eventually breaking. They do that, and it almost seems like a scene later, after one scene of Gort going crazy in his cell, he supposedly breaks and he tells the IMF the whole plan. I would have loved to see Gort break and tell the IMF the whole plan, but that really, I guess, wasn't in the cards for some particular reason. The ending sequence of this episode is really cool, where Dan as Wilson at a party ends up killing one of the ambassadors who is in charge of the peace talks with the United States. When he does that, he runs off into his office, right? And that's where Barney and Willie bring in Gort, who has been in the mental institution this whole time, and they place him on the table in Wilson's office. Dan shoots the gun. He runs off. The guy that planned this whole thing bangs on the door, comes into the office, and basically, starts telling this woe is me story. When Dan comes back in, and he reveals that this guy and Wilson, but it's really Gort, Dan pulls off the mask of Gort, revealing that it's an assassin. The police who are at this party arrest the butler guy who had this plan from the very beginning, and Gort is supposedly dead. Okay, guys. So here's the thing. This episode was really good. I loved the way it was directed. I loved everything in the mental institution. But I really thought that we needed a little bit more context as to what the IMF wanted to accomplish here. I mean, listen, I know that the whole thing was that they need to go into this country to get this U.S. ambassador. But it felt kind of muddled to me and kind of unnecessarily complicated. That'll do it for my review of Mission Impossible Season 1, Episode 25, entitled Shock. In the comments below, tell me what you liked about it or what you didn't like about it. Until next time, as usual, I'll see you when I see you.
So much happened here, and so much is about to.